Dire predictions of an overpopulated planet have been with us for centuries. What if they're just plain wrong?
Alert! The number of babies born in America last year falling to a 32-year low.
But there's already a population crisis hitting major economies across the globe.
Look at these numbers. How do you explain this decline?
Coming from the world of data science, I felt I understood populations are going up and that's a problem. When I saw what was actually happening, I couldn't sleep.
Most people think we have like too many people on the planet, but actually this is an outdated view. I think that the biggest problem the world will face in 20 years is population collapse.
This 4-year project took me to 24 countries, and over 230 people were kind enough to give me an hour of their lives.
Shock.
How could it be that suddenly countries are having so few children? I needed to go and find out.
I'm kind of not ready.
We don't have any role model in a real world.
I just really want to establish my career first.
I've always wanted to have children, but not now.
Well, the weird thing is that many women want to have children.
So when would that be?
That's the crazy thing. I don't know.
It was devastating.
Muy tarde, too late.
This is my story too.
It's like a shock. What are we making with our future?
Is absolutely everything negative though?
Yeah, sorry. Everything's negative. Sorry.
Do you worry?
Oh, a lot. a lot.
I want to emphasize this. The biggest issue in 20 years will be population collapse.
How bad is this situation really? Will we be facing a childless world as parents are having less and less children? After a film screening in Vienna, British data scientist, demographer and film producer Stephen Shaw presented the multiple problems arising from declining birth rates in a podium discussion. Pushpa Carlsson talked to him afterwards about the key findings in his groundbreaking documentary, BIRTHGAP.
Stephen J. Shaw, you're a peer-reviewed demographic researcher, and during your research you came across a very striking topic that actually has a global impact, and you call that the birth gap. And in the birth gap, it says that we have too few children, too few babies to uphold society. But regarding topics like the current alleged climate crisis or other things that are happening in the world where we say there are too little resources for all people, isn't having less children and less babies actually an advantage?
Well, maybe. That's not my expertise. My expertise is understanding what the trajectory we're all on in terms of falling birth rates. Now, if you are of the view that there's too many people on the planet, some people are, well, the reality is the total number of births on the planet peaked around 2013. It's already down 5 or 6%. The total number of births in India peaked 25 years ago and is down 20%. The issue right now is not rising populations or rising birth rates. It's a long-term trajectory that we've been on, this is not new, in most societies, certainly in Europe and Japan where I live, for over 50 years. The point being we're already on the way down in terms of population. Sure, people are living a bit longer, so the total headcount looks like it's going up and will continue to go up for a little while longer. But as an entire planet, the total number of births has been falling for over a decade. So the concern for me switches from being worried about consumption on the planet. That's taking care of itself. If that's your argument, that was yesterday's conversation. The conversation today is the rate at which we've been falling in terms of birth rates for a long time, with over 75% of people on the planet now living in a country already below stability level.
What is the stability level?
When we say replacement rate is when the average woman is having 2 children, of course, not all women are having 2 children. Some will be having 1, some having 3 and 4, and some, for differing reasons, having none. In very simple terms, if we exclude those having more than 4 children, to get an average of 2 children per woman, those having 3 and 4 should be in balance with those having either 1 child or none. To get an overall birth rate of less than 2, it's a mathematical necessity that those having more than 2 are outnumbered by those having none or 1. The lower birth rates go, the proportion of people having no children or 1 child must get greater and greater.
When you're below that, you get an exponential effect. Well, that sounds scary. What does that mean? It means you're in a downward spiral. That sounds very scary.
Understanding population trends can be tricky, partly because it takes decades for changes to play out. Initially, low birth rates are almost undetectable except to maternity wards, but soon enough, we'll find closing schools, businesses that can't find staff to hire, and then close because they can't find enough customers. And meanwhile, the cost of providing our older generations with healthcare and pensions will continue to rise and rise as more and more people live longer and longer.
If any generation has fewer children than is needed to effectively replace them, it's not a good word, but that's the word we use, unfortunately, it means there's fewer potential future parents. And if you have fewer potential future parents in the next generation, even if they had 2 children each on average, birth rates would not go back up to what they were before. They would then stabilize at a lower level. But that's not happening anywhere. We're saying that the next generations are having again fewer children, which means the number of future parents goes down and down and down and down.
We're in the year 2026 right now.
Yeah.
How bad is it?
It could barely be worse. I think what has happened, even in academia, that we've just started to take this for granted as something that is just happening, and that maybe there's little we can do about it. The problem is we haven't really met the consequences yet. You see, when birth rates start to fall, again, which really happened 50 plus years ago in many of these countries, you barely notice. In fact, in the first 20, 30 years, there's a boost to the economy with low birth rates. Why? Because you need fewer schools. You need fewer, childcare. And in the next 20 or 30 years, there's another boost to the economy. Why? Because unemployment levels goes down. Because there's so few relatively workers, and you're pulling women into the workforce. That's what we have been doing. So actually, people having fewer children has meant more availability of men and women to work. So you go through this cycle of about 50 years, where actually this is not a great economic problem. Now, in reality, you've just walked into a trap, because the real economic consequence comes when the shrinking number of future workers gets to a level whereby the current standards that we have for pensions, the current standards that we have for healthcare, social care, cannot be maintained. Why? Because the number of older people isn't going to decrease for really quite a while. So we find ourselves in this situation where you might say we've got too many old people. Well, okay, actually the reality is it's not that we sprung more old people, they didn't suddenly land from Mars. It's that we don't have enough younger people to continue the societies that we traditionally have gotten used to, the comforts we've gotten used to. And then if I could say, people often think, well, okay, well, it's older people's fault then. Well, that's overly harsh. I don't see it that way at all. But you see, healthcare systems are used by everybody. So they're used a lot more by older people. So when you, in any of these nations, when you go to look for medical attention, competing against older people more and more and more to get a doctor's appointment, this affects everybody. And when you see taxes going up, as they will, to try and maintain standards, this affects everybody, young and old. So, this is a crisis that socially, economically, geopolitically, in terms of loneliness, in terms of decaying communities, in terms of actually everything, has pain involved for young and old for many decades to come. And we have to understand that we need to focus on solutions, because if we give up on that, and by the way, no society in history has ever been known to come out of this.
Is this unprecedented, this phenomenon?
No. From what we know, it's unprecedented. But there's clear evidence going back to the Roman Empire. And I'm not an expert in the Roman Empire, but I've spoken to PhDs who have studied this. And it's well known that small family sizes and childlessness were a deep concern for the Roman Empire. Speeches were made in the Senate. They imposed extra taxes on those without children and those with one child. And they took away pension benefits from people without children. And it's supposedly said that Caesar Augustus got up in the Senate and said, where are future Romans going to come from? Do you think they're going to spring up from the ground? No. The Roman Empire...
No politician dare say that today.
Yeah. Well, some have tried, but those who've come closest have often seen it backfire. So there's a way to address this topic, but it is believed that prior civilizations, potentially including the Greeks, who knows, potentially every prior civilization faded away from low birth rates. But the core point is we don't know of any society who's ever recovered. We cannot point our finger to say, we need to do what that country did. It doesn't exist.
So is recovery even possible at this point that we're at right now?
Yes. And I say that because the vast majority of people, certainly women in their fertile years, either have or want kids, 90% or more. If 90% or more people were having the 2.2, 2.3 children that most mothers are continuing to have, it varies a little by country. In Austria, it's closer to 2. You would still get stability or close to stability. So that's the starting point. Is it possible? Of course it's possible, because people are missing out on the children, the families they want to have. That's not disputed in academia at all. So is it how to get there?
That's the question.
That's the question.
So what of countries such as India or China or Africa, who are actually populous continents?
Well, each of those are quite different. China had the one-child policy since around 1980, and China managed to get its birth rates to a level that I know they were aiming for, so that its total population would max around 1.2, 1.4 billion, and they were very precise about that, and that happened. So when they took away the limit to one child around 2015, and birth rates went up for a year or two, it looked quite positive that they were going to be able to stabilize the birth rate. But what happened very quickly was the birth rates went down very quickly. And went down more than they'd been before, so they made it a 3-child policy. You could have up to 3. And birth rates went down further, and then they said any number of children you want. In fact, the same year, they opened it up saying, okay, as many as you want, and the birth rate went down. And from what we know, there isn't a huge amount of data out of China. China really now is a deeply aging society with ultra-low birth rates. India, different situation, very young country, but the total number of births in India peaked about 25 years ago.
25 years.
25 years since peak child happened in India. And it's down to about 20% since then. 90% of its states are already below stability level. And important states, especially in the south, are at levels equal or close to European levels and have been since the 90s in some cases. So when I look at India's population, the total is increasing because thankfully people are living out their lives. They've got better health systems, better sanitation, better medical care. So for a time, the total population of India is going up. It's only because of people not dying young. But that will reach a cap soon because the actual birth rates in India tell me that a humanitarian crisis is unfolding there. Well, what's the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding in India? There's going to be a crisis of elderly people there who the society will struggle to support. So even when you look at India, a country we think of as having too many children, it's just not the case at all. It hasn't been like that for at least 25 years.
75% of us now live in countries below the replacement level. And what surprises many is that even across Africa, birth rates have been falling fast. Overall, since 1980, women in sub-Saharan Africa, on average, are having one fewer child every 15 years. It's not difficult to predict where this trend is going. Africa is on the exact same downward path as the rest of our aging world.
If it continues, and all the evidence is that it will, because that's what's happened everywhere else, by 2050, 2060, there's going to be countries in sub-Saharan Africa who are below replacement level, having the kind of conversation we're having here. And if we're lucky, if they're lucky, by that time maybe some country will have figured out how to stabilize population again. Maybe Africa will time it well, being able to learn from others. But in effect, we're all on the same path, just at different timing.
Does education or career, be it male or female, play any integral part in this?
Tangentially, yes. What I mean is, it's not a case in all the data I've seen, and I use, official birth records for now across 40 countries, 300 million mothers going back to the 70s or earlier in many nations. What you see is that education and career development has been elongated, certainly from the 70s, say. And as a result, the age of family formation has been getting later and later and later. And it is absolutely evident in the data that the later a society starts having children, the average age that people are having children, men and women, the fewer people will ever become parents. It also shows if that age is by 30-ish on average, that people will go on to have, if they're the first child, 2, 3, 4 more, like their parents' generation or even grandparents' generation. But it's not directly education and career that's causing people to think, I don't want to have kids now. We know that 90% of people in those fertile years have or want kids, and that doesn't really break down greatly by education or otherwise. So education is really important, especially for women, of course. Education is the biggest challenge here. I'd like to see us going towards lifelong learning, towards a more flexible and integrated approach between education and career development over a longer period of time. I mean, so many people don't know what they really want to do till later in life anyway these days. And I think if societies are going to have a chance of stabilizing it, they need to focus on the 20s and making them more flexible for people who want to have kids.
So what would you say was consequential in sparking this birth gap in the first place?
And this is really the heart of my research. Many great demographers, researchers have focused primarily on trends within one country or within a certain era of time. In essence, I put these 300 million mothers across decades and nations into one big pot. Mm-hmm. And I've looked at this from a point of view of not caring about the country, not caring about the culture, not caring about the decade, not caring about the financial status or women's rights or all those things.
So eradicating all the arguments that people would usually bring forward to say this is what causes it.
Exactly. It's what might be referred to as structural demography. When you peel all those things away, what structural issues? So the birth gap, the term I coined, it's been used more and more. It's basically the gap between desired fertility and actual fertility, and also between the fertility levels to maintain the stability of a nation. You find that there are substantial commonalities that do not change based on culture, time period, economics, or anything else. And the isolating factor that you pull out of the hat when you've done all that is the average age of parenthood determines almost everything. So if you know in a given country that the average age of having a child for a woman first time is around 30, and it is in most countries now, you can narrow down, you can infer, even predict from that, the range that a birth rate would be in for any nation. So it becomes a much more common global trend than I think people were considering. And in a sense, that's good news. It means we don't have to focus on local levers, because it can take 5, 10, 20 years to put a new economic policy in place, a new employment policy, a new education policy, just for individual countries. If we're all in the same boat, as we say, we can learn from each other. We can hopefully find a solution soon.
So in your estimation, what would you say would be a tangible, reasonable, and practical solution for this greatest issue that we have facing us globally? What are the levers that we can actually pull if we say we want to reverse that to a certain degree?
Well, the first lever is actually so simple, and yet potentially the most powerful. Young people today believe that generally starting a family 35 to 40 is a reasonable time to start having a family. So for my research across all developed countries that I've got data from, which is most of them, women turning 30 without a child have at most a 50% chance of ever becoming a mother.
50%?
Yeah.
That's striking.
Yeah, and actually in Japan it's age 26. In the UK, I looked at quite recently, it's 28. I suspect in much of Europe it's 28. So if you're 28 and don't have a child, you have a 50% likelihood. And people will say, no, biology is not, it's more 30s or mid-30s. This is not just about biology at all. In fact, at that age, I believe biology is a minor factor. Of course, not for everybody. It's family formation, generally, and that involves finding a partner who's on the same page as you at the same time and settling down, deciding we're going to start a family. It turns out that gets harder and harder to do if you haven't yet met that person or have not gotten divorced, breakups, etc. All those things that can happen. So, for me, the common factor is delayed parenthood. So you said the solution. The solution for me starts with awareness. We're very good as societies educating young people, quite rightly, how to avoid pregnancy. We say nothing about real outcomes in the fertility window, yet the data is there. We can tell people in Austria and any country that based on current fertility patterns, the likelihood of becoming a parent after age 30, based on outcomes, is whatever. We don't need to do any more than that to, first off, from my experience, to motivate, inspire young people to do what? To talk about this. You're lighting a fire under young people who are surprised by this, who oftentimes may make different decisions for their own lives, or not. We've got to respect people who don't want children. Yes. Really, I think we have to, and it's counterproductive not to in this argument, because the vast majority of people do. So, in a respectful way, simply letting young people know what the real outcome likelihood is, I think will inspire young people, but that's not enough, because then societies need to help re-engineer themselves to support young people who want to prioritize having family. Educational pathways, career development, all those things need to be brought into the equation. But I think young people will drive that. You know, once we see what I think will be a level of motivation from younger people to say, wait a minute, this isn't okay, you're telling me to study for 5 years and then focus on my career for 5 years, if the likelihood of me ever having a family is less than 50% by the time I turn 30. That's not okay for a lot of young people.
And delaying that family planning and that family founding at such a long pace of time.
Yeah, we simply need to increase awareness amongst everyone's society, and I think that's the best thing anyone can do within your friend group, within your family, to start talking about this topic, and what I call unplanned childlessness. Involuntary childlessness is a little different. That's it's related to biology. It's related to medical, of people who perhaps tried IVF and it hasn't worked. That's involuntary childlessness as it's defined. Unplanned childlessness is you just didn't get a partner at the right time, or you're focused on your career longer than you should have, and then there's a breakup or some other circumstantial thing happened. I believe that represents as much as 80% of all childlessness today.
So then awareness is the key.
Yes.
To reversing the damage that we have already done. And from your estimation, not all hope is lost. There are some things that we can do, and by spreading the message, by being vocal about it, by heightening awareness that there is a problem, but there's also a solution, we can turn things around.
I think it's vital to give people inspiration, that we have to accept that damage has been done, and communities will shrink, and populations will shrink, and the healthcare systems will be under pressure, and taxes will go up. That's already baked in. But for the sake of future generations, if nothing else, we need to focus on a longer-term stabilization. And I think once younger people see, decade by decade, not year by year, but maybe 5 years by 5 years, things getting better, and that the future, 50 years is a very long time.
Yes.
But if you're young today, if you're in your 20s today, that's your retirement window. So I believe, once we start, the sooner that we can bring a general level of potentially optimism towards a solution. But this is not going to be fixed overnight.
Mr. Shah, you have done great work with your research, traveling the world for over 9 years and putting together this documentary called The BIRTHGAP, which can be seen on YouTube, on the YouTube channel BIRTHGAP. It's 2 hours long, and you can watch it on the YouTube channel. Educate yourself and help educate the people around you. We can all contribute and do our part in being part of the solution instead of the problem. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you very much.